Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Donald Trump's decision to take America out of the Paris Climate Treaty. Now, Mrs. May has been accused by opponents today of a pathetic response to that, given her refusal to back a strongly worded response from France and Germany. The Prime Minister said she was disappointed by the President's decision, which he said had been dictated by economic factors. Jeremy Corbyn said the decision was reckless and dangerous. Our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, has more details.
Putting America first. It's his slogan, but there's outrage at Donald Trump's decision to pull out of the international treaty signed in Paris to tackle climate change.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
The backlash has been strong, not just on his doorstep. It's gone global. World leaders are united against him, and it's spilled into Britain's general election. Theresa May, like many leaders, sees global warming as a threat to future generations. Out campaigning today, she explained she told President Trump by phone of her disappointment. She's also defended her decision not to join European leaders in signing a statement condemning him.
I made the UK's position clear to President Trump last week at the G7 meeting, as did the other G7 leaders, and I made the UK's position clear to President Trump last night. Canada and Japan have not signed that letter, neither has the UK, but we all have the same view, that we remain committed to the Paris Agreement.
Morning all. Morning everybody.
That was more than enough cause for Jeremy Corbyn, also out in York today, to hit out hard.
Donald Trump's decision to pull the United States out of the Paris climate change deal is reckless and dangerous.
And to depict the Prime Minister as too weak to stand up to America's leader.
She's instead opted for silence and once again subservience to Donald Trump. It's a dereliction of both her duty to this country and our duty to our planet.
What could you do as a British Prime Minister to materially change what President Trump has done?
Would I meet and host Donald Trump in Downing Street? Yes. Would I talk to him? Yes. Would I be polite? Absolutely. Yeah. I would even offer him some Yorkshire tea.
The Paris Treaty committed nations to work to cut the emissions that cause climate change. It was seen by signatories, then including America, as a breakthrough. Politicians from China to Europe are in step and against the US president. World leaders are speaking out strongly.
The
decision of the US to withdraw from the UN Climate Accord is very regrettable in diplomatic terms. The Paris Agreement is a cornerstone of cooperation among the nations of this world. This agreement is indispensable. After the announcement of the US administration, we have to look towards the future. The US decision can't and won't stop all those of us who feel obliged to protect this planet.
Here, the spat's translated into wrangling between parties on either side of the divide opened by the US president.
Unlike almost every other Western world leader, including Theresa May, he sticks to what he promised he would do. It's called democracy.
Donald Trump needs to be condemned in the strongest possible terms for this reckless and, frankly, economically illiterate decision.
The set's nearly ready for the two contenders to head a freshly elected government after next Thursday to make their case to the country.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Climate change is obviously a huge issue, though the environment has never been the top priority of most voters at election time. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn's rival claims to lead Britain will be tested here, on the set of the BBC's Question Time Leaders Special programme tonight, in front of a live audience. Theresa May will be hoping that her credit with voters remains strong after what's been an occasionally faltering campaign. It's Jeremy Corbyn's opportunity to gain ground. A lot of people make up their minds in the final week of a campaign. A point scored or lost here later tonight might, just might, make a difference. John Pienaar, BBC News, York.
Well, let's stay with the kind of response that there's been to President Trump's decision. We're going to talk to our science editor, David Shukman, who this evening is at the Thames Barrier. That's one of the largest flood barriers in the world. David, tell us a little more about the science community and what they've been saying today.
Yes, Hugh, I'm at the Thames Barrier, the great structure that keeps London safe from flooding. The big concern here is that bit by bit, year by year, the level of the sea is rising, and that's because of global warming. It's one of many reasons why scientists here in Britain and around the world are so worried about what Donald Trump has done. They point to decades of research, all suggesting that in the future, rising temperatures will increase the risks of very damaging weather events, longer droughts, more severe heat waves and rising seas. So where does this leave us? Well, nobody's saying the Paris Agreement is the answer to everything, but they do say it's the start of a pathway, the start of a journey towards objective of sorting out the problem. Now, if without America, that's clearly going to be very much harder and will take a great deal longer.
David, thank you very much. David Shookman there for us with his thoughts there at the Thames Barrier. Well, earlier today, as Mrs May and Mr Corbyn were making their final preparations for tonight's event here, the question time at the University of York, news came that the Conservative candidate in South Thanet in Kent, Craig McKinley, along with two party workers, have been charged for allegedly filing false expenses during the last election campaign back in 2015. The Conservatives say they believe the allegations are unfounded. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford, is in the constituency this evening with the latest for us.
Yes, Hugh, the people of Ramsgate and the other Kent seaside towns that make up the constituency of South Thanet find themselves in an extraordinary position tonight. One of the main candidates is now facing criminal charges for allegedly breaking the rules in the previous campaign. In the 2015 general election, the voters of South Thanet were deluged by big-name Conservative campaigners, desperate to keep the seat away from Nigel Farage.
Craig McKinley, I'm the local candidate, sir.
Their candidate posed with every member of the front bench that he could find.
Craig McKinley.
The Tories won, just. But today, Craig McKinley was charged with filing false expenses for the campaign. So was his agent, Nathan Gray, and the senior campaigner, Marion Little, OBE, has been charged with aiding and abetting them. This the moment this morning when Nigel Farage heard the news.
You're joking? Oh my good Lord. Right, that's big news. OK, thank you. Craig McKinley has just been charged. Once again, it is bad judgment from Theresa May. You know, why on earth would you allow someone to go ahead as a general election candidate when this cloud was clearly hanging over him?
At the heart of this case is the thousands of pounds the Conservatives spent on hotels, like the Royal Harbour here in Ramsgate. These were paid for by the National Party, but a police investigation into whether they should in fact have been on Craig McKinley's individual election costs has now led to these criminal charges.
The Conservative Party continues to believe that these allegations are unfounded. Craig McKinley is innocent until proven guilty, and he remains our candidate.
In a statement, Craig McKinley said, "I'm very disappointed with the way this has been handled. Why leave this until a few days before the election?" He'll continue to campaign to be re-elected, though just being charged doesn't disqualify you from becoming an MP. His first court appearance is in July. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Ramsgate.
Well, here in New York, at the University of York, Laura Kunsberg is with me, our political editor, looking ahead to this question time this evening, Laura. A range of subjects could come up, obviously. The Trump issue on climate is surely one of them.
Well, that may well be raised. Already today, there's been a sharp attack from Labour on Theresa May for expressing disappointment in a phone call to the President, rather than taking a much firmer public stand and joining in with the real anger that's been on display from some other world leaders. And, you know, the environment's not really been an issue during this campaign, but it is, of course, a subject that's important to lots of voters. And it also feeds into some accusations that have been levelled against Theresa May before about cozying up to Donald Trump right at the start when she took over as Prime Minister, seen being holding hands with him as they left a White House press conference. And I think it's that makes her slightly vulnerable on this. That may be things that are put to the audience tonight.
6 days to go. Just some thoughts then on what each of these leaders really has in store tonight in terms of what they need to do.
Well, I think they need to do the same thing. First of all, they need not to drop a terrible clanger. You know, they're being put on the spot by members of the public, by voters, and being seen by millions of voters, including undecided people who haven't made their minds up yet. So the first goal is not to mess up. The second goal would be to get through unscathed, to get through looking confident, competent, looking assured, and therefore trying to send out a strong message to the public that they are both in different ways ready for the job. But of course, particularly for Jeremy Corbyn, who despite the more buoyant mood in Labour camps is still the underdog very much in this race, particularly for him, but also for Theresa May, their ideal scenario is, of course, to put through some kind of stellar performance that lifts the perception of them beyond where it currently lies. The stakes are really, really high for both of them, and that's why they've been squirreled away prepping with their teams for much of the day.
We'll talk again later. Well, thank you very much. Looking forward to it when it happens.
Today, Doncaster, yesterday, Teesside, West Yorkshire and Derbyshire, all lifelong Labour heartlands. So why has Theresa May been campaigning there? The answer, Conservative strategists believe they can persuade Labour supporters who switched to UKIP at the general election last time to back Theresa May this time, turning those seats into a sea of blue. But with talk of a Corbyn surge, is that strategy still on track? Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has been to the former mining town of Mansfield to find out.
When mining died here, the pit villages knew who they blamed. Round here, they called them Tory scum. 3 decades on, and much has changed in the old mining village of Warsop. There's new housing where the pithead stood, and signs the old enemy is making serious inroads even here.
I know there's a few just down the street what vote for Conservatives, so yeah.
Even in an old pit village like this?
Village, yeah.
When the Tories called this election, they thought they could win big, including in seats like Mansfield, Labour since 1923. The calculation was that ex-Labour voters who'd moved to UKIP would come over to the Tories in big numbers. Some Labour voters who'd voted Brexit last year might come over to the Tories in decent numbers. If Theresa May can win here, her gamble will have paid off.
I will vote Tory because I think I'd sooner have that young lady Theresa May, in charge of finances than a communist Corbyn.
You never thought you'd say that when you were mining?
No, I've said to many miners who are going to vote Tory again, it's a matter of, we have to let that go now, that's in the past. That war's over, and it was a war, but that's over. Move on.
I was in the miners' strike.
So you probably thought you'd never vote Conservative in your life back then?
That's right, but the point is things are changing. You know, this is how it's gone. We want our country back, and that's how I've got to look at it. We want to be Britain, and I thought that's how it is.
In Mansfield, the vote for Brexit was 71%, the highest in the country. Theresa May hopes even more voters will be lured to her at the last minute as the keeper of the Brexit flame.
My husband's been a Labour man all his life because he's an ex-miner, but he says he won't vote Labour this time. I don't know why. I didn't ask him because then he'll start going on into politics and I don't understand
And you like Nigel Farage, you voted UKIP in the past.
Yes, I did. And if he was still with UKIP, I'd have voted for him again.
But if it was polling day today, right now?
If it was polling day today, I would carry on and go and do my own garden.
Some senior members of Theresa May's team, including the strategist Sir Linton Crosby, would have been perfectly happy if she'd spent the entire campaign doing nothing other than repeating the slogan about Brexit and leadership. But Theresa May decided to inject a controversial, fairly meaty, austere manifesto into proceedings. Labour's manifesto, with its public spending promises, proved to have more traction than the Tories expected. Has the course of the campaign pushed seats like this beyond her reach? If Theresa May said she was putting a lot of money into the NHS...
I would have been swayed towards the Tories.
But instead it's Jeremy Corbyn?
Yep.
And that slightly surprised you?
Yeah. I'm usually a Lib Dem voter.
I think I've always been kind of towards Labour because I just feel like they, you know, I'm from a very working class family, we've always struggled and I feel like they just fight for the underdogs. So, but more so in this campaign do I feel like I resonate with them so much and I just feel like, yes, okay, I feel like you're the one that's going to be fighting for myself and for the people that I love.
At the minute, I think we need Theresa May for Brexit, but I don't like some other things she's doing, so I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know. But it'll not be Labour. I can tell you that, it'll definitely not be Labour.
And did you ever think you'd say that in your life?
Never. Not coming from me, I mean, I used to work down pits myself.
In the years since all trace of the pits disappeared,
Labour's place on the landscape has been eroding. It predates Jeremy Corbyn, and it's taken some voters to a place they never thought they'd be.
Would you call yourself a Conservative?
Now, that's a difficult one. Probably not.
But you're going to vote for Theresa May?
Oh, yeah, but she's better than a bad bunch, in my opinion.
You're going to vote for?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
For Theresa May?
Yeah.
Are you happy to say you're a Conservative, or does that still stick in the throat?
If it's going right, and I like the words of what she's saying, I would go for it. And, you know, this is how I've got to look at it.
But would you call yourself a Conservative?
We could always change our mind, can't we?
But your message to people like yourself, ex-miners,
yes,
who are thinking of voting for Theresa May?
No way. And I would say to everybody that's going to vote Theresa May, no, remember your roots, remember where you come from. We are Labour in Mansfield. We're not Tory, we're Labour.
I've listened to you, but I think my personal opinion finished it. There's only one party who hope to get in is the Tories.
The Tories have decimated this area now, Flower. No chance.
No chance.
But the Tories are still pumping in resources here, despite a rickety national campaign, believing they can win where once their name was muck. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4 News, Mansfield.
Well, joining me from York before the latest live TV set piece are for Labour, Rebecca Long-Bailey, the Shadow Business Secretary, and for the Conservatives, the International Development Secretary, Priti Patel. Priti Patel first. It's squeaky bum time for you, really, isn't it?
Well, you know, this is the final week of the election campaign, and we're focused, and the Prime Minister is absolutely focused on making sure that we both win this election, but importantly, go out there and deliver for Britain. This is an important general election campaign. It is about Brexit. It is about who will be negotiating a strong deal, putting our national interests first through those Brexit negotiations. And of course, Theresa May is the only person that can do that.
Was she going to run the Brexit negotiations better than she's run the election campaign, then?
Well, look, we've had a very strong election campaign, and I can say that as someone who has been out and about across the country, campaigning, by the way, in many constituencies where people voted to leave the European Union.
Sorry to interrupt, but you say you've had a very...
Well,
hang on a second, you said you've had a strong election campaign, and your lead has gone from 15 to 5 points in the polls. What's a weak election campaign
This isn't about the polls, Kathy. Absolutely not. You know, we should remember that this election is about delivering for Britain, and that means focusing on who is going to lead those Brexit negotiations. And as I was saying, I have been in many of those constituencies where people voted to leave the European Union, and they know that actually this is about delivering the leadership that will get that deal for Britain, the right deal for Britain.
OK, let me
put that Brexit negotiations.
Let me put that to Rebecca Long-Bailey, because you heard lifelong Labour voters in Gary's piece there who are opting for Theresa May. For that reason, they don't believe that Jeremy Corbyn would deliver on Brexit.
Well, he certainly will. He's a very capable negotiator. He can win friends and influence people, as they say. We've got a very robust offering in terms of Brexit. We've also got a very robust offering in terms of the rest of our manifesto, which is quite frankly transformative. Today we launched our industrial strategy. We've seen very little from the Conservatives on this. We aim to rebuild our economy and make sure that communities up and down who feel left behind, like the gentleman you spoke to, receive the investment that they deserve to create the high-paid, high-skilled jobs of the future.
OK, but if he can win friends and influence people, as you put it, he's not doing that well with his own MPs, is he? I mean, Joan Ryan, the Labour candidate in Enfield, wrote to her constituents saying no one thinks Theresa May will not be Prime Minister. And she's saying vote Labour simply to reduce Theresa May's majority.
Well, look, the Labour Party is fully behind Jeremy, and we know he's going to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, she's not.
I think there's been a sea change during this. I think there's been a sea change in this general election when people have actually started to debate Labour Party policies, when they've seen the offering in our manifesto, the money that we're going to invest in public services.
OK, sorry to interrupt, but if there's been a sea change, how come Joan Ryan is left behind by the tide?
Well, as I say, the vast majority of Labour Party members and Labour Party MPs are fully behind Jeremy Corbyn, because we know how much our communities are going to suffer if we endure another 7 years of a Conservative government. This is a land that relies on food banks, where people are on zero-hour contracts, having to walk miles every day to work, only to be turned away and receive no money at all. We have veterans coming back from war, not receiving the support they deserve. And then the final kick in the teeth for pensioners a few weeks ago was the Conservative manifesto manifesto when Theresa May stated that she wanted people to sell their houses to fund their social care, and she's taking the winter fuel allowance away from over 10 million pensioners.
OK, Priti Patel, this is about leadership at the end of the day, isn't it? And has Theresa May gone weak and wobbly with Donald Trump, because she's the only European leader not to sign that letter condemning what he's done on climate change?
I think, Cathy, that's utter nonsense. And do you know what? Leadership is on the ballot paper next Thursday, along with the economic future and the security of our country. And when it comes to the United Kingdom and our international relations, we stand tall in the world through many of the bilateral relations that we have, the strong relationship that we have with the United States of America, and also the ability to pick up the phone and have very frank conversations, which the Prime Minister has done exactly that today.
Such a strong relationship, though, but she can't actually
change.
stand up to him. She can't actually say what she thinks about climate change.
Well, that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And I think also you just have to look at many of the discussions that she's had directly with the President of the United States on security issues, on terrorism issues. These are the areas where we have a very strong and strategic relationship. And quite frankly, no one can envisage Jeremy Corbyn having those forthright discussions with the President of the United States, or even standing up for Britain internationally.
Rebecca Long-Bailey?
I think that's absolutely preposterous. Let's remember that only a few weeks ago, Theresa May was stood on the steps of Downing Street feeling very paranoid and stating Europe was getting involved in our general election campaign. This isn't a strong and stable leader. This is a weak and wobbly leader who wants to alienate most of Europe. Now, the businesses that I speak to up and down the country tell me that no deal is a bad deal. We've already seen this government pick winners. We saw the Nissan deal where they offered a bespoke Brexit deal to one company, and they left vast numbers of businesses out in the cold without any direction, without any transitional period, and without any guarantee that they were going to fight for access, impediment-free access to the single market.
Priti Patel, just a quick one. Are you sure that Theresa May is going to be turning up to this debate or non-debate tonight, or have you got your phone on standby in case she gives you a ring at the last minute?
No, look, Cathy, the point, about not just tonight, but also this election. I've already said this. This is about not just leadership, but the future of our country in these Brexit negotiations. And there is another important point here. Rebecca has just touched on
really
Europe
sorry,
and our
Priti
relationship
Patel,
with Europe.
Priti Patel, we're out of time. I'm really sorry, but I'll take it that you've got your phone on silent. You'll be watching the debate. Priti Patel, Rebecca Long-Bailey, thank you very much for joining me.
If you sat through an hour and a half of the leaders' debate and you're joining us now, first, a warm welcome. Your stamina is admirable. If you've missed the whole thing up until this moment, even better. We're live in York in the spin room, and we'll be talking to Boris Johnson and Team Corbyn in just a moment. You'll get a full taste of it here. This was the last major set TV piece of the election, and it fell to the public to ask those questions. Theresa May faced concerns about services, Brexit, and her recent tendency to backtrack. Jeremy Corbyn was pressed again by the public on Trident, his commitment to the red button and his attitude towards the IRA. It's hard, perhaps, to talk about winners and losers when those two never actually met on stage. But let's go live to Nick Watt, who was watching the debate from the spin room in York and can tell us what happened, Nick. What was your sense?
Well, in these debates, you're looking for a zinger moment. You're looking for that moment of the US presidential election in 1980 when Ronald Reagan defined that campaign by turning to Jimmy Carter and saying, "There you go again." Now, this obviously wasn't a head-to-head, and you didn't really have a big moment like that, but what you did have is awkward moments for both leaders. For Jeremy Corbyn, his difficult moment came when he was asked about the Trident nuclear deterrent, and he made clear that he's changed his position from 2015 when he said he would never use it. He said that he would not authorise a first strike, but he could not bring himself to say that he would actually authorise it in those circumstances. And at one point, a member of the audience said, surely it's better to have it there and not use it than to not have it. And Jeremy Corbyn shrugged his head and he wouldn't answer that question. For the Prime Minister, there was a difficult moment when she appeared not to know that there have been recent reports that the UK has given aid money to North Korea. A more versatile Prime Minister would have said, we give money to people in need, we don't give it to regimes.
Nick, who was your sense? And I know you've clarified they didn't actually meet, but was there a winner from tonight?
Well, Theresa May entered this performance having struggled in this campaign. Jeremy Corbyn came here to York tonight having had a very, very good few weeks. And I would say against that background, the Prime Minister performed considerably above expectations. There was a difficult moment for Jeremy Corbyn when he was asked, would he specifically condemn IRA terrorism? He couldn't do that, and he said that he condemned all acts of terrorism. But there was one interesting unifying theme. Both leaders came under questions in their core areas and absolutely stuck to their positions. So for Theresa May, there was a difficult emotional moment when a nurse said to her, why is it right that I've only had a 1% pay rise, which is basically a pay cut? And the Prime Minister said, there's no magic money tree, we have difficult public finances. For Jeremy Corbyn, he faced some difficult questions from a micro businessman employs just 5 people. Why should I face an increase in corporation tax? And Jeremy Corbyn said, I'm sure you'll understand that we do need money for public services. The mood in the two camps tonight, the Corbyn camp, are very happy. They are saying that the Labour leader got across his core messages, and the big message he got across was that Theresa May wouldn't debate with him. But I have to say, I've seen some glum cabinet ministers this week, but this evening I'm seeing some very, very happy cabinet ministers. One said to me that was a slam dunk win for Theresa May. This is the last debate with the two leaders. This will define the last few days. So look, our policy editor Chris Cook, he's been taking a look at this debate. Here's his report.
Tonight was the final event in this year's election debate series versus Corbyn. Not really. It was May. Tonight was the final event in this year's election debate series. May versus Corbyn. Well, not really. It was May and then Corbyn. The Prime Minister insisted that they appear separately. And you can see some of her logic. She used the opportunity to kick lumps out of her opponents when they couldn't retort.
You'd have Diane Abbott, who can't add up, sitting around the cabinet table, John McDonnell, who's a Marxist, Nicola Sturgeon, who wants to break our country up, and Tim Farron, who wants to take us back into the EU, the direct opposite of what the British people want.
The audience, though, gave her a pretty rough time.
Refusing to answer people's questions, refusing to talk to Jeremy Corbyn.
The Prime Minister and potential future Prime Minister of the UK apparently doesn't understand the difference between a learning disability and a mental health condition. So do you need that comment?
Your party called the European referendum for the good of the Conservative Party. You've called a general election for the good of the Conservative Party, and it's going to backfire on you.
Including on Brexit.
Do you really think that you actually have any real leverage with Brussels?
An area where she has a rather well-drilled response.
One of the reasons I think we can negotiate a good deal is because actually a good deal in trade terms is not just of benefit to the UK, it's of benefit to businesses in the remaining countries remaining in the European Union.
Social care was where Ms May had her weakest section. She pretended there hadn't been a U-turn involved in announcing a cap on social care costs.
I heard the scaremongering that came out after our manifesto was published, and I set out one of the details, aspects that would have been in the consultation, and which is about having a cap on the absolute level. So there's a floor of 100,000, you can protect 100,000, and we'll consult on what should be the cap.
And this killer question was one she couldn't give a meaningful answer.
You can tell us what the floor is now, why can't you tell us the cap?
Because
there was a run of concerns about austerity too, including mental health, school spending and public sector pay.
Working as a nurse for 26 years, do the Tories expect our support in the light of another 1% pay increase?
That was where Mr Corbyn was most comfortable, making a clear defence of a bigger state.
We are asking the very biggest corporations to pay a bit more, but I tell you what, I think it's worth it. It's worth it so that any young person can go to university and not leave with debt. It's worth it to make sure school head teachers don't have to collect at the school gate in order to pay the teachers' salaries.
Mr Corbyn, who started out pretty relaxed, lost his rhythm after being pressed several times on whether he'd use our nuclear deterrent if we were attacked.
The reality is that we have to, obviously, try to protect ourselves. We would not use it as first use, and if we did use it, millions are going to die. You have to think this thing through. I'll decide on the circumstances at the time.
All right, no, all right, you said that you
would you use it as second use? Or would you allow North Korea or some idiot in Iran to bomb us and then say, oh, we better start talking? You'd be too late.
No, of
You're
course
going to
not.
have to do it first.
He was also pressed on his 1980s contacts with Irish Republicans.
There has to be a coming together at
you
some
were
point.
talking to them when they was killing their people, their women and children. You were talking to them.
There has to be. Well, I was talking to representatives of the Republican movement. Yes, actually, so was the government at the same time.
So this debate didn't tell us a lot we didn't know. These two politicians have vulnerabilities, but by now, that's hardly a surprise.
That was Chris Cook, and joining us now from York, the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson. Foreign Secretary, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's funny, we're used to hearing a lot from Theresa May about strong and stable. I don't think she mentioned it once tonight. Why not?
Well, I think I think it's res ipsa loquitur, as we say on Newsnight. I think she spoke for herself. It was it gave a commanding performance, and it came across very, very clearly that she's overwhelmingly the best candidate to be Prime Minister on Friday of next week.
Because strong and stable,
listening to the
was how she wanted to be seen.
She emanated both virtues, and her answers were clear. They were concise. She got through a lot of them. Yes, she had some tough questioning, but I think when you contrast Jeremy Corbyn's performance and his the difficulty he had with some pretty elementary questions about the defence of this country, about the Brexit negotiations, about the economy.
Let's talk about her, because the audience didn't see strong and stable tonight, did they? They said that she wobbled. They said she backtracked. Their words, not mine. They said on social care she still hasn't even been able to admit that it was a U-turn. She talks about wanting to be honest, and yet she can't even admit that that cap on social care was something that she thinks she now got wrong and has changed her mind on. That's not strong and stable at all.
Well, on the contrary, I think that she gave a very full answer to the whole question of social care, and she spelt out once again that this is to stop people having to go through the agony of selling their homes to pay for domiciliary care whilst they're alive. We're raising the threshold to £100,000 that you can pass on when you die. Yes, of course, we're going to consult on the cap, though there are difficulties with the cap being regressive, as she explained very clearly. I think the audience got that, and it was actually quite a useful exchange. But when you came to Jeremy Corbyn on the defence of our country, I mean, we've invested £31 billion in the Trident.
We'll be talking to Labour about Jeremy Corbyn and about Trident.
He absolutely
I assure you,
refused to confirm that he would even use it.
But I want to talk about the Conservatives' message
he would not
tonight.
Stick up for or defend this country.
Which is her message
and that
is
reads
about
across,
hard-working families, Foreign Secretary. That's something we've heard all the way through, that she wants to talk to hard-working families. And we heard tonight a nurse turn round and say to her that she's earning the same money that she was in 2009. And Theresa May said, there's no magic money tree. That's pretty condescending, isn't it, for somebody who's seen a 14% less money in real terms? That's what she said tonight.
She pointed out that we've already spent £500 billion on the NHS. You are seeing improvements
she was talking to a nurse who hasn't seen her salary go up in real terms since 2009.
I understand, and nobody minimises the difficulties that people are facing. But as Theresa May just said, we have to be prudent with public expenditure. And it's because we've been prudent that we are able now to put another £8 billion into the NHS to continue to improve that great service. And you can only do that, as she said, if you have a strong economy. And just I know you don't want me to talk about the policies of the Labour Party.
I don't, because I want, when you're talking about a strong economy and you're talking about being prudent,
Jeremy Corbyn seemed to think to condescend to a guy who is running a small business, and blithely to want to whack up his taxes with no understanding of the damage that does to the productivity of the UK economy, the ability of our economy to generate the tax revenue we need to pay for the NHS and all other public services.
You can confirm then what Michael Fallon told The Telegraph: there will be no increase in income tax under this Conservative Parliament if you win. Is that correct?
We are a party that has already taken 4 million of the lowest paid out of tax.
No increase in
altogether.
income tax. Is
We've
that
cut
what you're going to
taxes for
pledge
31
now?
million pounds,
With 1 week
and we
to
are
go.
we will bear down on taxation, and we have absolutely no plans to raise income tax or any other
sign
tax.
for high earners. Can you tell them then you are not going to raise income tax? Because you've just talked to me about being prudent and having to make choices and not paying a nurse more than 1% raise in salary. So there'll be no increase in income tax, even for high earners, right?
Our plans are to cut taxes. Labour's plans are to put them up and to keep putting them up and to fund all sorts of unnecessary things such as renationalising the utilities and the railways at colossal expense.
Right.
At colossal expense. And as I've just said to you, Emily, it's by having a strong economy, by promoting business, by believing in this country, by getting the right Brexit deal above all, that we will have the revenues, that we will have the tax revenues we need to pay for great public services.
Let's get on to foreign affairs.
£8 billion
it's lovely to have you as the Foreign Secretary here. In the last 24 hours, we've seen Donald Trump walk away from the most significant global deal to save the planet. And the best we've heard from Theresa May is that it's disappointing. That sounds like what you'd say when a souffle doesn't make it.
Well, come on. Everybody remembers, of course, that Bill Clinton, who was much loved by the liberal left and all the rest of it, actually did not ratify the Kyoto Protocol, and yet America has met its obligations under Kyoto. Let's see what Donald Trump does before we rush to wave fingers at him and accuse him of this, that, or the other.
So what he did was
let's
not wrong.
work with the Americans. I do think, frankly, I think it would be better, and I make absolutely no bones. I think it would have been better, as I said to Rex Tillerson, and I've said to all our counterparts in the White House and across government in America, it would have been much better for America to keep going with the original thing. As it happens, Donald Trump had made a clear commitment to his electorate before the American election that he was going to do just this.
That we, as a special relationship ally, can say is disappointing.
What we can do. We will continue to work with the Americans to reduce CO2. And by the way, huge steps have been accomplished on both sides of the Atlantic to do this. We've cut CO2 massively in this country, and so have the Americans.
But the Europeans got it together to sign a joint letter. Why didn't we sign that? Why didn't Britain partake in that signature?
As you heard the Prime Minister say very well, she doesn't have to tag along with a bunch of other signatories to some letter. She was
so we're tagging along now, is it?
She was talking to the American president himself in a way that I don't think any of those other leaders were. She was making our views very clear, which was that we disapprove of what has happened. We don't think it's the right way forward, but we are going to work with the Americans nonetheless to continue to tackle climate change, and that is the right thing to do.
When you use phrases like that, you demean the office of Foreign Secretary, don't you, Boris Johnson? I mean, people are starting to talk about whether you're going to keep your job after the election, and when you talk about tagging along with foreign leaders, that just demeans your office.
Well, I simply fail to understand what you're saying. It is completely right of the Prime Minister to ring up the American President to express the position of the British government in, I think, terms that were loud and clear. And our job is, unlike Jeremy Corbyn, who's I think the most anti-American leader of the Labour Party I can remember, we have considerable ability to help the Americans.
You accused European leaders last year of a windorama.
The difficulties facing the Americans and
do you think people
to help them to get it right. I'll give you a few examples. I'll give you a few examples, if I may. One of them is obviously over the Iran deal, which Jeremy Corbyn alluded to several times. Britain has been able to work with the Americans, so they haven't scrapped the Iran nuclear deal, which I think had been a risk. We're working with them on their policy on the Middle East peace process, where actually Donald Trump is showing a great deal of interest and has not decided to move the embassy to Jerusalem as he threatened. And if you look, for instance, at the actions of the Americans in Syria, their treatment of Russia, they're far more proactive now in dealing with the atrocities being committed by Assad than the Obama administration was, and that is very much, I believe, thanks to the intercessions of the UK government and the powerful relationship
if
that
America
we developed
came to us for support in bombing Assad, it would be hard to say no. Do you still stand by that? Because Theresa May didn't back you at the time.
That's a hypothetical question. We haven't had any such.
Yours.
We haven't had any such. We haven't had any such request. And all I can say is that the two occasions when the Americans have taken action at the Sharat airfield and at Al Tanf, I think they have had a material impact on the calculations of the Russians and of the Assad regime. And that is something that the Obama administration absolutely failed to do. And I think a part of that success is thanks to UK diplomacy. And as for your questions about the job that I may have, the job that I want next week, if at all possible, is to be MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, which is what I'm campaigning to be. But even more important than that, Emily, if I may humbly suggest to you, is that we get the right person leading our Brexit negotiations. And tonight it was absolutely clear to me that there's only one person who could conceivably do this, who has the vision, who has the clarity and the firmness of purpose, and that is Theresa May. So
thank you very much.
I don't disagree with Nick Watt's analysis that this was a pretty heavy victory for her tonight.
We have plenty more to come. Boris Johnson, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, as we've seen, following Theresa May came Jeremy Corbyn. He took to the stage, also facing questions from the audience, from the host, David Dimbleby as well. We are joined now by Ian Lavery, Labour's National Elections and Campaign Coordinator, and he can miraculously join us exactly where a second ago you may have seen Boris Johnson. Thanks very much for joining us, Ian Lavery. A lot of this, as you heard from the Foreign Secretary and indeed from the audience tonight, came down to that one question: security. Everything to Jeremy Corbyn tonight really centred around whether the audience and the public trust him with the nation's security.
Well, I think Jeremy answered very sincerely, very honestly tonight, as he always does. I think it was a tremendous performance by Jeremy. He stood there, took the questions, answered every single one, unlike Theresa May, who has had a disastrous campaign. And what you've just seen there before, by the way, is a job interview by Boris Johnson. Very intriguing stuff. Jeremy Corbyn performed exceptionally well tonight.
The trouble is, though, that the same questions have plagued him right the way through this campaign. And it wasn't from journalists tonight, it wasn't from, the BBC and the media, it was from members of the public. And it suggests that there is a baggage that surrounds him. Questions about his relationship to terrorism, relationship to the IRA, relationship to nuclear weapons. You can't get past that, can you?
Well, Jeremy answered that fully tonight. I mean, Jeremy said, for example, that for many years the only way to ensure that we have resolutions to conflicts across the globe would be to have constructive dialogue, discussions, and at times it's not very it's not very favourable. At times you might have to speak. At times you might have to speak to people who you really don't want to. And Jeremy explained that tonight. With regard to IRA terrorists, what Jeremy did say is that he spoke to people from across the piece, nationalists and unionists in Northern Ireland. Look at the solution we've got in Northern Ireland. We've got the Good Friday Agreement. We've got peace, and that's because Jeremy Corbyn and the likes of them think that it's right to discuss and consult with people across the piece.
Jeremy Corbyn didn't take part in the peace process. He could have called the IRA terrorists. He could have shut that one down, and he could have said what he would do with the nuclear button at a second response. He didn't. That's why the questions keep coming back.
I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that Jeremy Corbyn took part in any discussions. What was interesting, what Jeremy did say, is at the time when he was discussing with all parts of the community in Northern Ireland, that the government were actually doing that at the same time, Margaret Thatcher's government. That was really interesting, but they were right at the time, because what we want to see and what we have got now is a peaceful solution to the issue in Northern Ireland. Surely that's what we all want.
Would you accept, though, that until Jeremy Corbyn can make those sorts of questions go away from members of the public that were facing him tonight, from people watching at home and thinking the same things, that he cannot actually be trusted with the nation's security?
Jeremy can be trusted with the national security. Of that isn't any doubt, and he did explain that tonight. He explained it very, very clearly that he takes the national security of this country extremely seriously. What the difference is between Jeremy and perhaps the Conservatives are, Jeremy believes in preventing further conflict. He believes in discussion, negotiation with countries right across the globe to prevent any problems with national security. He doesn't want to be waiting until the final seconds to run in a relay to press a button that perhaps could incinerate millions of human beings. I think that's sensible, and I think that's what people want. We want dialogue, we want discussions, we want honesty, we want sincerity, we want agreements that this will never, ever happen. We don't want people running towards the button and trying to get there before each other to kill off the human race. It's absurd.
Ian Lavery, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take you back to the election now in our regular Friday panel. Joining me here, LBC's Ian Dale, Polly Mackenzie, former advisor to Nick Clegg, and Paul Mason, Corbyn supporter and journalist. Very nice to see you all. Who do you think, a quick run through, who do you think won that debate? Were there winners and losers for you? Paul? And I'm going to say this now, you've been very good at not being too tribal up to this point.
There's only 5 days to go, though, so
yeah,
don't hold
I have great hopes for honesty.
Look, I think what was wrong with that debate is that at this stage in the game, we need expert people quizzing both sides. I was actually who won there was the politicians, because they weren't expertly quizzed. Neither of them was pushed to the limits of where their positions are, because the audience, I think we're coming from an emotional position, which is where many voters come from, but actually on things like nuclear, which is like tonight, this is the issue that Labour in spin doctors want to avoid. I want to hit it head on. The position is clear. The newness of, for example, no first use is incredibly new and innovative for the British nuclear military establishment, and yet nobody in the audience seemed to pick it up. So I'm concerned that the quality of democracy we're going to get at the end of this election is one where two completely different politicians have really failed to be expert expertly in the way that would have helped.
It's very brave, isn't it? So the audience asked the wrong questions.
They are quizzed expertly by expert interviewers. Corbyn supporters go on Twitter and troll them and call them Zionists for asking hard questions.
Well, obviously that is wrong, but the point I'm trying to make is that we need to know now what is the cap. It was said again and again, for example, what is the cap on how much savings you lose from the dementia tax?
Okay.
We don't know.
Well, we're not going to get that one. Polly, let me come to you. What did you feel? I mean, this was also about the warmth that an audience has for whoever's on that stage.
Yeah,
who won that?
I think Theresa May was better than she's been, which is a bit of a shift. Actually, she's had a bit of a wobble for the last 10 days, and it felt like she was back on track as good as she could be. And I think I disagree with Paul. I think you do have to have different phases. You have, your Andrew Neil's taking people to pieces on the experts, but you also do have to see if people can emote and can relate to human beings. And actually, both of them were sort of better than you would have expected on that.
I'll tell you what, politicians get found out when they're asked questions by real people. I see that every day on my radio show. It's the real voters, when they ask the questions, the politicians are sometimes like gulping goldfishes, and we saw that to an extent tonight with Jeremy Corbyn. This was an important event. It had the highest audience, I would imagine, of any interview programme so far, and I'm afraid, Paul, Jeremy Corbyn was found out tonight. Anyone watching that with his remarks on terrorism, where he could not bring himself to condemn the IRA...
He condemned them
in... No, he didn't. He used this catch-all term.
All
he
terrorist violence in
IRA.
I don't want to run...
Also, on nuclear defence, this man is not fit to run...
I don't want to run the debate or any BBC debate, but what I do want to say is, at the end of a week where we see an extraordinary diversity of polls in a way that we haven't for, 2 years or whatever, where would you put your numbers now? If I come to you for maths, and I know you do this anyway as a hobby, but where would you put? You're going for a Tory majority still?
Yes,
of
I
what?
am. I think that Theresa May has had a bad week. Let no one deny that. But tonight she came out fighting, and I think anybody who watched that, any floating voter who watched that, will have been more impressed by Theresa May than they probably thought they would be. Now, in terms of numbers, at the start of this campaign, I predicted a Tory majority of 74. Then I went through all of the constituencies, and on the basis of the high opinion poll lead, and came out with a majority of 130. I think that has rowed back now. I don't think think it'll be that high, but I still expect a relative Conservative landslide.
Polly, I'm at about 100, you're saying then? Or
I think it could be 80 to 100.
I mean, I think Ian's probably better at the detailed numbers than me, but yeah, the Conservatives are going to win this, 50, 75, whatever it is. But what's depressing for me is neither Theresa May nor Jeremy Corbyn is particularly strong. They've both got big areas of weakness.
Stronger than Tim Farron.
Well, Nick Clegg is worried about his seat tonight, isn't that right? I mean, some of these polls and modelling has got Sheffield Hallam as a toss.
Everybody said Sheffield Hallam was going to be lost, and as it happened, it was returned with a substantial majority. So,
is it conceivable that the Lib Dems could go backwards this time?
Elections, anything is conceivable, and then people pledge to eat their hats and look like idiots, or run down streets naked, and I just, of course, anything is plausible.
My promise in 2010.
All I can do is believe the range of polls, and I think the range of polls point to the maximum Theresa May is going to get is 10 extra seats, I would have thought.
Seriously?
Yes, absolutely.
Seriously?
Yeah. And
I hope there's money on this afterwards. Paul, do you think, are they, in Corbyn HQ, but can I just ask you, are they preparing now for the possibility of a hung parliament or a win?
They're preparing for the possibility of a win. They're preparing for the possibility of a hung parliament. That's why you've seen Starmer out talking about the Northern Irish and the Welsh and the Scottish governments having a part in Brexit. You've seen that...
And fair to say they weren't at the beginning of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely not, because you go back, I believe the polls. The ranges from a small Tory majority through to a hung parliament, through to a minority Labour government.
Most of the polls are still 10 to 12 points ahead, aren't they?
Exactly.
Some aren't.
I spent the whole of the 2015 election campaign preparing for a hung parliament, wishing it's going to happen doesn't actually make it happen.
No, I'm believing the polls, but what I will say is...
You're believing the polls you want to believe, you're not believing the majority of the polls.
What I will say is, what Labour are very concerned about is the turnout. On a high turnout of young people, Labour is in a very good position.
And you have to get young people out.
Well, if
young
any of them
people who actually put their money where their mouth is.
If they don't vote Labour, it means £9,000 a year
not just young
on your
people's
university fees from September.
He's also guaranteed that students who've already gone through university are going to have their money refunded.
Brilliant.
I mean, fantasy politics.
Let me ask you something about this, because
this
feels like a personality race, doesn't it? And weirdly, they've gone like that. The more people have seen of Jeremy Corbyn, it seems, the more they've warmed, and the more they've seen Theresa May, the less they've warmed.
Well, I think you saw a turning point tonight. I genuinely believe that you do.
She was an automaton.
Well, you said earlier on the Daily Politics you thought that she was unwell, which I thought was an absolutely disgraceful thing to say. I think you should apologise for it, because it's out of the Trump playbook. That's what it is.
Your side is calling my leader a terrorist. I won't be apologising for it.
No, we haven't called him a terrorist. We've questioned his terrorist sympathies.
Where's she been all week?
Would you like to apologise for that? Would you like to apologise? Out of the Trump playbook, you should be...
She's terrified of debating, and it's legitimate to ask, where is she?
It's not okay to question her health. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Where is she?
Do you think any of this cuts through?
Well, yeah, some of it does. But reinforcing what we heard some Vox Pop say earlier, that they all still feel the same, even though actually the policies are incredibly divergent in this election in a way that they haven't been recently. But you still get that sense that all the politicians are kind of mediocre.
Who do you think's played dirty?
Oh, everybody.
Do you?
What does that matter? The future of the country is at stake. The other side...
So it's fine to play dirty.
The other side is actually saying that Labour and the millions of people who support it are in some way tainted by terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because Jeremy Corbyn,
what you are doing is digging the grave of consensus politics in this country.
He's a friend
you
of
are digging the grave of consensus politics in this country. Labour supports the rule of law, anti-terror,
I'm so sorry. We need to get to Steve Smith. He's on his bus. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
What's this racism about Diana? Why do you hate black homosexuals?
We need to go on.
Here we go.
Finally,
Paul,
we'll come back to Diane Abbott next week. Shush. Right, imagine a scene. A snap election is called. The Newsnight office gathers to discuss ideas from this creative huddle. A germ. In fact, perhaps lots of germs, but we'll leave those aside. A vision of red, a bus, a battle bus with Steve Smith on board, visiting constituencies that have been craving some election glamour. Let's have a look.
Welcome to our popular and acclaimed general election series, Battle Busted. And if you can see this, it means we've had a second film commissioned. Let me refresh your memory about our high-quality format. We're attempting to sprinkle some election razzmatazz on the places the party leaders don't touch. Too rock solid for them to rock up to in their wheels. And so we're bringing our own.
The man that's driving me mad is going away.
We've come to the great city of Liverpool on our magical mystery tour, to another constituency that doesn't tend to see a lot in the way of political Beatlemania.
He's got a ticket to ride, and he don't care.
Liverpool's Fab Four constituencies are considered to be among Labour's safest seats. We're in Walton, where the party romped home at the last election with an 81% share of the vote. This constituency's so red that the Conservative candidate lost their deposit last time. Walton's only a few square miles in size, all too easy for our charabang to stray across the constituency borders. Looks like this bus is not for turning. So why is it that election fun and games generally pass Walton by? If only there was a numbers-savvy prodigy to give this vehicle some editorial ballast.
Hello, Stephen.
But who's this, everyone? It's only Newsnight's Chris Cook, Kit to our Knight Rider, Holly to our Red Dwarf.
Liverpool Walton, it's fair to say, is a one-party Labour seat. It's one of only 5 constituencies in Britain where the second-place party got no more than 10% of the vote. If the other parties last time round had been interested in fighting here, they could each have spent £12,000 just on Liverpool Walton. But in practice, the Conservatives, UKIP and the Liberal Democrats all together combined spent only £3,000 on their campaign here. It's really not a seat where the result is in question. Enjoy Merseyside, Stephen.
Oh, thanks, Chris. After all these years, some facts in one of my investigative reports. Who'd have thunk it? So do the folk here feel they're being taken for granted? Where better to take our bus to meet voters than at the colourful bus stops of the constituency? Why did no one think of this before? Hello, folks. How are you enjoying the election so far? Rubbish.
Exactly, yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies. How are you?
All right.
Are you excited about the election?
No.
No?
They're all the same.
How many of these battle buses have you seen so far?
This is the first one.
The only common you really need is, don't they? Even the Labour.
It's pretty rock solid, this seat, isn't it? Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, that is the problem. Once you know you've got a safe seat, you don't bother.
Do you think it would help if you saw more of the party leaders round here?
Yeah.
What do you think of our bus?
Good. You don't see them buses down there.
You don't, do you? Bye-bye.
Bring them back. Bye.
I sometimes feel like my MPs aren't always visible enough in the community, definitely.
You sound like you take quite an interest in it, is that right?
Yeah, definitely, because it's affecting our future. We've had such a turbulent year for politics, haven't we? Or a turbulent 5 years even, so...
Thank you so much for talking to us. I hope your real bus comes along soon.
Yeah, so do I.
You wait all Newsnight for a bus and then 2 come along at once. It's one of those natty convertible numbers. Enough to give a fellow bus envy. Would you swap your Liverpool tour bus for our Newsnight battle bus?
Not really, no.
No. Newsnight battle bus. Come and have a chat about the election. No? Oh. Please yourselves. Which bus do you prefer? That one. This is Stephen Smith with the #1 tour bus in Liverpool. Not that one, this one.
Yeah, that's the bus you want to be on, just no one was.
I've been